Oh, welcome. This is really cool. I was a bit worried that maybe like 5 people show up or nobody, because it's a kind of an exotic topic here today. My name is Jutta Eckstein, and I work as a coach, consultant, trainer out of Germany. And to be honest, I hate this myself when people say that, but if I'm honest, I have to say it. So I started off as a developer. I used to develop even in C++, but then fell in love with small talk. I'm really sorry to say that here. And just by saying small talk, you also probably can tell that I'm not that young anymore, because small talk is kind of gone. However, now in the last, almost 20 years, I focused more on, first on design, architecture, and now more on agile stuff. And I also wrote about this, so this is my sales slide or embarrassing whatever marketing thing. I focused a lot on scaling Agile, actually at the time where people just started to work with Agile. So my first book on scaling, I published that in 2004, which is really some time back. And then I worked on distributed, and now I'm really more on the organizational level. So this talk today, which has that strange term in it, Sociocracy, is really based on my latest book, which is this one where I'm looking with a colleague of mine, John Buck, into what does it need to make a whole company agile. And Sociocracy plays really a big part in that. And so this talk is really, what can somebody on a team, actually it doesn't really matter what kind of team, it can be a developer team, but it could also be a different team. So right now I want to focus on a development team. How can a person on a development team benefit from what Sociocracy brings? So that's the focus of this talk today. And this doesn't work if I'm not switching it on. That makes complete sense. Now it's on and it's working. That's good. Okay, so I want to focus on 2 main things. The one is on decision making, because what I'm experiencing and also observing that this is often a big struggle. So that people are then unhappy with decisions being made, or feel like they are not getting heard, or it's taking too long, or maybe it's too quickly and not everything has been evaluated in the way it should have been. So decision making seems to be a big thing whenever there's one then more person involved with the outcome of the decision or impacted by. The other big topic, and it builds on the decision making thing, is how to elect somebody for, most often it's kind of representing something. It could be an architect, or it could be a person who you want to elect for negotiating on some APIs with other teams, or negotiating with maybe also management, or whatever it is. So coming up with who would be the person to do that. So that's the one thing, but it can also be used in just kind of selecting a given topic. For example, the next feature we want to build because we think it's the most important thing to focus on, or also what kind of product we want to focus on. So these are kind of the key topics, and then I want to provide a little bit of background of that. So I'm not starting with, in case you are surprised, I'm not starting with telling you what Sociocracy is. We're just diving into it, what it's offering. Okay, so decision making as the first topic, and I said already a few things why I think it's important. So one thing that I am seeing is that often there is just the buy-in missing. And if the buy-in is missing, then everything just falls apart. You can make a great decision, but if nobody really believes in that decision, then it's just almost impossible to implement it, because everyone will find a way around it and do something else. And it's not, maybe I'm now kind of sounding like, oh, this is what other people do. I know I'm doing that. Yeah, if I'm not happy with the decision that's been made, I try to find my own way and do my own stuff. So I try to ignore it, and I think it's very human to do that. So one thing is we need to come up with a way to get this buy-in really. Then the other thing is, well, although we often discuss stuff then in groups or teams, there are people who feel like, I'm never heard. Maybe they even say whatever they want to say, but they feel like, well, it's always other people who are counting, and maybe it's really those people, more the talkative people. So it feels like there are, depending on the group size, but often like 2-3 people dominating the whole conversation, and therefore also the direction in which the decision is made later on. And even if you then try to kind of incorporate one or the other voices, very soon after, one of the talkative will talk over it, and so it's gone and missed again. And the last thing is that sometimes, at least, I see that the way the decision has been made is not really transparent. So I'm there, and then somebody tells me, like, okay, we are now doing it this way, and I thought, oh, who says that, and why is this now better than what we've done before, or haven't we agreed on something else, and why is it now like this? So these are kind of the struggles that I'm seeing, and that's why I think we should look at different ways of making decisions. Let me start with what kind of decision-making strategies do you actually know, or are you aware of, or have you experienced? Anything that comes to your mind? Consensus. And do you have already something, well, it doesn't have to be you, but it could be you, what it's good for, or what's the advantage, what's the disadvantage? And can be anyone.
Disadvantage is it often takes time and it's difficult.
Yeah, it feels like it's a really slow thing often. And the good thing is, yes, right. Everyone was involved, and everyone is kind of, yeah, I got hurt, and we have the buy-in. What else?
Management decision or somebody higher up?
Yeah, we call it autocratic. Higher up is kind of the thing that comes in mind. But it could also be a talkative person who's dominating it so much that everyone feels like either scared or feel like, oh, I don't want to prolong this anymore, and I don't want to go into a fight with that person. That could be also the reason. So why you have an autocratic decision. But most often it's a management decision, the way you stated it. So, and what's the advantage, disadvantage here?
Well, it could be faster.
It could be really much faster, yeah.
And depending on the culture you're in Norway, it wouldn't work. In India, it would be fine. But it's the downside, of course, is that people won't feel involved, and
Yeah.
risk. There's also a risk that a decision is taken without enough information.
Right, yeah. So that you don't get the full information of what has gone into the decision-making process, right? Yeah.
You also run the risk of it taking a lot longer. You have to then renegotiate or at least discuss with the people not involved in the decision-making process because they feel left out and might object.
That's the key point about what autocratic decisions. Often you're missing the buy-in, and because you're missing that, for whatever reason, it could be the lack of information or whatever it is, or maybe not agreeing with it. And because of that, you often have to restart, and implementing that decision then takes so much longer. So the decision-making is fast, but implementation of it, sometimes at least, unless the punishment is really hard, and maybe people just do it. That could be true too. Anything else comes to your mind? Decision making.
So for the autocratic, it might feel more consistent.
Ah.
Because you have one person who is driving the process, you can always make decisions using a fixed set of bases, right?
Aha, that's a very interesting point. So from an autocratic standpoint, and which is also then true for the whole company or this group, that probably it's more consistent with everything else, so it falls into the strategy. And just maybe one thing to that might go back again to maybe not everyone has the same information, and that's why it is the case that if it's autocratic, that person has all the information, and therefore it will be consistent. If other people don't have that information, it probably is not. Any other decision-making strategies you are aware of or you are using? Yeah? Yeah?
Well, you could have like democratic.
Yeah, sure. What's with democratic decision-making? How is that good, not good? Advantage, disadvantage. Yes?
Well, you get the majority vote, so but you also get like dominance of the majority, so you can close all voices.
Right, right, exactly. So it is. It sounds a bit like all the voices count and everyone is part in the decision-making process. But if you look at it, the minority voices are actually ignored. Well, you have heard them, but then you ignore them with the decision. And probably I have to say that right now, this is really very strong right now in the US, where it might have been even the other way around with the last election, right? That even the majority votes have been ignored because of the way they are doing it. And the thing is there, at least, that, well, they're completely not counted, right? And then you fall into the same traps as here. Right, no buy-in because you feel like, well, I said, but nobody listened, and blah, 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 right? Any other ideas of strategies?
I think one advantage of the democratic method is that even if you don't agree with the decision, you understand the decision because you've taken part in it.
Yeah, right. You have been involved, and so the decision-making is more transparent than it is with other strategies. That's very true. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We always have a drive for creating meaningful projects, and I work in a huge company, and it's too big to even touch the real decision makers. And when we're not able to decide anything, we almost have the drive to just create some meaningfulness around the project and just go for that.
So
make us feel good while we're waiting for something else.
So is it? I'm not sure if I heard it. So you didn't say it, but what I'm kind of hearing is no decision. So it's kind of wait and see.
It feels hopeless because every corner we meet or end up in, nobody knows who is the decision maker for this.
Yeah. Right. Right. Which is then also very intransparent if you have a wait and see, and then whatever comes up is coming up. So it could end up as being an autocratic decision at the end because just somebody takes the step ahead and just does it. At least one thing is kind of what I'm missing is called random or magic. That's what you can do in your wait and see as well. Just roll a dice. Or flip a coin, or whatever your favorite thing is, or the first thing that shows up, or whatever it is, right? That's sometimes true for things, or helpful for things where it doesn't matter so much, right? And it's all same, and so you just need to go forward with one thing. And it can be same because you really don't have enough information, and so it's better to try one thing before getting stuck in the whole decision-making process, right? I want to suggest here, how many do we have here now? 5, a 6th one, and this is the one Sociocracy comes with, and that's called consent. And before I go into this, keep in mind all those decision-making strategies, they have some value. So even if I hope you find consent decision-making then valuable for you, it doesn't mean that all decisions should be made this way, because there are pros and cons for everything else, and so sometimes it's better to take, for example, doing a random decision-making process, right? Okay, so for consent decision-making, where do I start? Well, it sounds very much like consensus, right? It's not a spelling error. It is consent and not consensus. And consent compared to consensus, the key difference is consent looks for acceptance, versus consensus looks for agreement. And this might sound at first like it's almost the same, but let me phrase this a little bit different. If we make a consensus decision, we try to be all in favor of that decision. Whereas in consent, we try to be able to tolerate that decision. Is this in our range of tolerance? And so I might not be the happiest person with that decision, but it is, and that's kind of a slogan that comes with it, it's good enough for now, safe enough to try. And this is often the question we are asking ourselves in a consent decision-making process. So is this good enough for now, safe enough to try? Now, there's also something that sounds a little bit like what you know from consensus. There we have the veto, and which makes it so long, right? Because there's always somebody who has something, right? And that's why we start again and again and again. And veto is not what we are having in consent, but what we are asking for is if anyone has an argued paramount objection. And what this means is, if I would have an argued paramount objection, it means I fear if we decide this way, our joint goal will be at risk. So again, this goes more into the tolerance. I might still really not absolutely be in favor, but the key thing is, if somebody from the people who are involved, infected, impacted by that decision think if we follow that way, we will have a problem really reaching our joint goal, then everything is really changing, because different than a veto, actually a veto is not so much different than an autocratic decision making, because it can be really one person ruling everything. The key difference here is we are embracing that objection because it really means we have overlooked something really important, because if we overlook it, we will not reach our goal. We want to know about this. And so this makes a huge difference also in attitude, because now it's not like if it again would be me like wanting to having this objection, and now all of you try to convince me and pull me over to your side. That's not like that. It's the objection is there, and we jointly try to resolve it. How can we make the decision so that we still can reach our goal? And that's for me at least a huge, huge difference. Another big difference is, and this is something I use all the time, even if I'm not having decision-making things going on. If we are in a team, in a group, discussing something, and especially when the talkative people talk and talk and talk, and it maybe gets heated, I'm stopping it and I suggest we do a round. And a round means one is speaking after the other. Somehow I think, well, it should be obvious, but I learned that I need to explain, because then always two people have said something, like we start here and you two said something, but then there's of course Sepp, who is always talkative, and you will jump in. And so I have to, well, stop. We do like one after the other and you have your turn. So just talking in turns, that's already often helpful, because again, then everyone gets the same airtime and every voice is getting heard. Now for the consent decision making, we have that decision at the table and say, okay, this is what we want to decide upon. And now the round is either we ask, do you consent? Or we ask, do you have any objection? And I prefer often asking for the objection and not for the consent, because asking for the objection is more like I re-evaluate again, do we really put our goal at risk? And consent might be too quickly. Another thing that I've learned, so in the Agile field, I don't know how many of you are using this, but in the Agile field, it's kind of common if we want to come quickly to a decision, we do like the thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways. up, well, I'm with it, and sideways, whatever majority vote it is, I'm going with it, and down means I'm against it and I will speak up. So it's kind of what we have in, so that could be the argued paramount objection, right, the thumbs down. However, I realized it's different for a lot of people if they speak up and say no objection, or if they just do their thumb. So speaking up and really verbally saying what I want is, at least for me, a bigger commitment. So often the signs, the signals are easier to do, and afterwards I feel like, oh, I didn't really say anything, and it's not really mine. So I felt like this is a difference. What are your questions? Could this be usable for you?
I mean, it's good to know that it's sort of, especially the consensus consent thing, that you can say, okay.
Right. Yeah.
Be aware of it when you're.
Yeah, and that there's this difference. Uh-huh.
Are there places where you wouldn't use consent?
That's a good point. So as I said in the beginning, they're all valuable, and you can all use them. So Sociocracy says all policy decisions are done by consent. Or they are also saying consent governs decision making. So for example, you can have a consent decision that, so we all have a consent decision that it's you who will decide on which framework we will use. And so you will make an autocratic decision, but we all kind of consented that, well, we think you're doing a great job and you will just go ahead and do it. So that's meant with governed decision making. So all the others have their place. Yet if it's really, affecting more the policy, I think it's important, and it's much quicker than you often think it is.
I guess sometimes also you're going for the autocratic, but you're trying to make involve people so you get down to the consent.
Yeah.
Like we're now going to see it in open offices. Nobody wants it, but you involve them, but you don't listen to them.
Yeah.
You give this impression.
Yeah, right. Well, could be. Actually, what I've also done, I've done democratic decision making on, like, we had different topics and we did like either hands up or dot voting or something. And then we made afterwards a consent decision if we can all tolerate that decision. Now, the thing that had the majority vote. So you can also combine these things. That's sometimes helpful too, because maybe some people really think it's a very bad thing. One really important other statement that I learned from Sociocracy is that we are not aiming for coming up with the best decision. And I said before already, is it good enough for now, safe enough to try, right? The thing is, if we try to come up with the best decision, well, we probably it will take forever, because we will only know in hindsight if it was the best decision. And even then it's difficult because we didn't follow the other path and don't know, can't compare. So, and that's why this trying not to come up with what's really best, because we don't know what's best anyway, and there's no clear definition about best. We look into what's good enough for now and safe enough to try, and can we do like going a step forward. There's one other thing that comes with it, which is it's a very good idea, and this is also true for all kinds of decisions, even if you are not taking consent with you back home now, put a time period to your decision. If you say, whatever decision you're making here, let's try that for the next 3 months, and then we revisit it. This feels completely different than any other kind of decision making, because we often, at least I'm sitting there and I kind of think this is for eternity, but of course nothing is for eternity, right? So kind of giving it a try and revisiting, keeping it open, that's already helpful. And that also comes with consent decision making, but you can easily transfer it to everything else. And that's, I think, a biggie. Any other questions you're having? Thoughts? Let me see what so I brought some slides, but I forgot about them, which is maybe good. Okay, we had that. Yeah, we said that as well. Oh, I like that quote. A colleague of mine, Jeff Patton, he says in his book about story mapping, open heavy discussions is a sign that it's not important. I'm not sure if this is really true, but I had times since I read that I'm observing that the more heated it is, sometimes the kind of less important it is, but it's probably not always true. But maybe if we keep being reminded by that quote, we can come back to good enough for now and not kind of, hitting it up so much. Okay, we said already that there are different strategies for coming from A to B, and they are all kind of valuable. And we talked about consent. Okay, and this is kind of my the key summary of that. So no paramount argued objection. So I have to voice it, and I have to say how it really risks the goal we are having, right? And then what I also said was, it's not about convincing me if I have the objection. The objection is owned by the whole group or team. So we try together to resolve that because we all want to still reach our goal. And the hearing everyone's voice was the going round. And again, I use this a lot even if I'm not going for a decision. Just, for example, in these heated discussions that Jeff pointed out, if you start going around, that often calms things down. Yeah, and acceptance, not agreement. So these were those things. Do you have any ideas where you could use it? Would you use it?
Well, the acceptance, not agreement, sometimes I've had to, as a product manager, I've had to, speaking with developers, I know, okay, we have to add this feature to something to the customer has, and we have this time to do it. The problem is that the teams don't like the underlying architect. They would like to redo the entire thing, and they really hate what's going on. They really don't want to do this, and then sometimes I deflate that argument, saying, "Well, I'm not asking you to like this. I'm asking you to
very good.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but we have to fix this for the customer. I know it's crap, but we have to do it." And that's kind of
it's really like that.
It sounds drastic, but it actually, every time I do that, it works. And okay, we've accepted that none of us likes this, we have to.
Excellent example, I like it, yeah, thank you.
Quick question with regards to that. How do you make sure you are not building technical debt by doing this all the time? Because this thing can easily lead you to this, right?
Well, yeah, and absolutely, and it's part of it is like, yeah, I know we're building technical debt to this, and that's of course something I need to accept. But this could be based on like, okay, somebody already signed the contract. We don't have the time to research. But yeah, those are the kinds of things that we need to on the table. Okay, as a product owner, I accept that this is going to give us problems. I still wake up in the middle of the night because one of these things where I've had to say this, because I still don't know how to solve the problem that came up 2 years earlier.
So there's one thing that's often helpful and also independent of what decision-making strategy you're using is having maybe a subgroup coming up with a suggestion for the decision. So Sociocracy calls it picture forming, so that the big picture is formed and maybe by a subgroup and not by the whole group. It depends. You can also do it with the whole group, but it's kind of coming up with what's on that table. And the way you were stating it, it's kind of you are doing this and you're framing it. So these are the options, that's the context, and that's, of course, important, and somebody needs to do that. Yes?
In this type of decision-making situation, I have a great experience with stating or realizing everybody before we meet what we are going to decide on.
Yes, right.
So we are all tuned into one problem.
Yeah, very good. So before the decision, whatever, making meeting, everyone is informed about what's going on. Very good.
It can be just yes or no to this.
Yeah, right. That's good. Take a last one.
Yeah,
and
I think also on that, which I've been thinking about while you've been talking, is that it's also not about just, okay, what's the decision we're making, but, okay, the people that are involved in the decision, what are we actually representing? Because we are probably stakeholders in some sort of thing, and we might be 5 developers and 1 from logistics who's actually going to be affected. And then democracy doesn't work, because actually there should actually be only 2 voices there, because it's there are only 2 people or 2 kind of stakeholders involved. So trying to decouple it from, this is not personal. This is about, okay, what do I represent, or maybe what knowledge do I have? Clearing out that, well, I'm here and I represent this because this is what I know about. This is what I know about, or these are the people I represent. And maybe you're even by proxy representing 3 or 4 other departments.
That actually reminds me of something else, and I'm pretty sure you have figured that. With consent decision making, every voice counts in the same way, right? And even if you have a complete mix of people deciding on that, it could be that the one highest up in the hierarchy or lowest or in the middle is coming up, finding out what is that objection that risks our goal, right? It doesn't matter who it is. So everyone is same here. Okay, I want to move on to the selecting or electing people and topics. And there's also a specific way what sociocracy is suggesting here. And I want to use here as an example, let's say we want to elect somebody who's representing us for this discussion, negotiation about the API with that other team, whatever. So it can be whatever it is, but let's say it's this. We are starting with, and that's again kind of this picture forming, what do we expect from that person? So what is the responsibility we are expecting? What kind of capabilities do we think that person should have? And so this is just, we all have the same understanding. This is how we start. Then the next thing is that each of us who are in this group team decision, so are impacted by that, we nominate someone, and that's actually on a kind of a ballot. And the ballot, I use something like this typically. So just a sticky note, and on the sticky note, so that's also the form, I say like I, and put my name on it, nominate Tom. And so we do that, all of us, and then we collect all those nominees. And that would be the first thing. I typically write it up on a flip chart, and so we have this list of proposals. Sometimes, I'm not doing this all the time, and I can't tell you what's my differentiator, why I'm doing it and why not. Sometimes I write also next to it who nominated whom. Sometimes I'm not doing it, so here I didn't do it. So it's just the nominees. Then the next thing is we do a round where everyone says the rationale. So providing the reason why that person has been nominated. And probably this goes back to, well, some experiences with that person. Well, we know that person, whom did I said like Tom, right? I might say, well, Tom did a good job in this last API negotiation thing, or I know him as somebody who really understands that topic, or whatever it is. So we all say like why we think this is the right person to nominate. After this round, we do another round. So, and a round again means one after the other, right, is speaking up. And the other next round is a change round. So the thing is, after we all have heard the rationale, the reasoning, do we want to change our mind and nominate somebody else? Because maybe we've heard somebody else is really even better qualified, and I haven't thought of that person before. So we do a change round, and now it maybe looks like this. And after we have seen this, the next step is that just, well, put it this way, the facilitator goes forward with a suggestion. And the facilitator, so I said already, like, I was the one nominating Tom here. The facilitator is part of the group. That's different than in other like facilitation understandings. So the facilitator is not an outsider, it's part of the group, part of the team, therefore the facilitator also nominates somebody, and now the task here is to make a suggestion. There are different ways how to do that. So basically it just means the facilitator comes up with a suggestion. However that person is doing it, it's up to the person. So what I did, for example, the last 2 times I was in such a situation, I just asked somebody, I said, who would you suggest? And so we go forward with whatever you suggest after you have heard all those different rationales and reasonings. And now you're seeing what's there. So it's just like, if I'm the facilitator, I'm ensuring that this is put forward. So let's say now it was Ellen who was the one who has been put forward. And actually this is here, yeah, here she's even the one who has been nominated the most often. So it's kind of a democratic thing, it sounds like. Doesn't have to be like this. So often it's not like the one who has the majority nominations. It can be anyone. And then we do a consent round. And for the consent round, the thing is the person who has been nominated, so Ellen, would be the person we ask at the last point. So we do a round, and the last person saying consent or I object is the person we put forward. The reason is, well, first of all, it's very, I don't know how to say it, encouraging, motivating, hearing from everyone else like, well, yeah, we think you will do a good job, so no objection here. And so this is helping the person then maybe also objecting. However, it's also only after we know nobody objects, it's also a thing, now we want to hear the objections of Ellen because we now know everyone is open enough to help getting rid of that objection, to resolve it, because we can jointly resolve it. So very often, if I have something like this, the typical objection is, I'm too busy. It's really kind of the thing. I have already so much on my table, I don't know how to do this as well. And so we as a group say, okay, maybe I can do this from your plate and you delegate that to me, and somebody else says for something else where he can help, and so on. So we together resolve that objection, and then we have that consent. So this is now the summary of this. So the first thing is clarification of function and tasks. Then we have the proposal round, and we do this in writing. It's kind of really making up your mind and not being, I don't know, just follow what has been said before you. So you have to make up your own mind about who you want to nominate. There's also something that I don't do the same way always. So here it says proposals are collected by facilitator and read out loud. Sometimes I also go around and everyone just says, well, I nominate whoever I'm nominating. So it's not always that it's the facilitator collecting and then reading it out, making it more anonymously. Then we have the rationale round, so providing the reason, the change round, and then the summary of the suggestion and proposal. Then again, the consent, you heard about the consent, and there the thing was the person nominated is the last to be asked, and then hopefully we can celebrate. So, and it works as well. So I've done it quite often for electing people, but it works as well if you want to put forward like a feature we want to work on, or whatever kind of technical depths we want to get rid of. So you can do the exactly same approach, well, except for maybe the consent round. You don't ask that technical depths that consents or not. Yeah. Any thoughts, questions about that? What are your thoughts? Could this work? I can imagine that if you haven't done that, it sounds like, oh, this is a long process. It takes forever. Actually, it doesn't. So I wasn't sure how the setup here is, but we could have done it like in 5 minutes. It's not really, it sounds like it because it's very kind of strict, do this, then do that, and so on, but it's really not taking forever. Given that we all have the same picture, the same understanding, what are we looking for, and again, given that we have all the understanding, we are not looking for the best ever. It doesn't matter. The real surprise that came to me when I started using this approach, almost always we are coming up with different people than I would have thought in advance we are coming up, because what I often have in mind, it's kind of the typical volunteers or the typical people kind of doing this thing, and then all of a sudden completely other people are showing up here because it's not a volunteering thing. Well, I can nominate myself. That's also allowed. So I haven't said that, but I can nominate myself. That's absolutely fine. Yet there are people who would never volunteer for whatever reasons. Maybe they think, well, I can't do that, and there are others who are better. But then if you're here the first time, that others think like, oh, you can really do that. This is really a big boost. That's really cool. Okay, so this is the election of or selecting of people. Well, I have this little slide where you can also come up with any kind of groups, like communities of practice that you're doing in this way. And I want to, well, I don't want to. I think I have 2 more minutes, right? Is that true? Okay, so we go to this one, Sociocracy. So Sociocracy is ruled by socios, where demos of democracy is ruled by the masses. So Sociocracy, in short, is like democracy for organizations. That's how it has been created. It has been invented in the 70s, so it's not something really new, as a lot of stuff we are looking at, especially nowadays. And it really is mainly based, well, feedback built in, or every voice gets heard. It's based on creating equivalence. That's the core concept, so that equivalence is like the most important thing here. And it comes with 4 principles, and we have seen 2 of them. So shared decision-making based on consent and electing people to function and task. Double linking is more if you look at the company as a whole, so it's probably not the thing that you are doing if you are working in your development team. That's why I left it out. And circles as semi-autonomous units, it's kind of groups that are self-organizing, doing the task that needs to be done, is kind of what's behind that. So this is the core of Sociocracy, and let me see, and it's the last minute. Oh my goodness. Let me go there. So this is, I said, it's part of the latest book that I've written, and I've not looked now into open space. I've only looked into Sociocracy, also as the title suggested, and that's that one part of what we call the bossa nova right now. And it's exactly 1/4 till, and that's why I'm ending exactly here. So thank you so much. And I hope you can make use of it. Just try it. Thank you.